when you sit at that computer and you start that magical process and you realize that, wow, all of this stuff is coming to me, all these answers. I never worry about what's going to come next because I know that somehow I'll get the idea and it will go on. And to me, there is nothing more satisfying than the actual writing and coming up with this story that is meaningful to me. And I think that is probably the most important thing that I could say to writers. What is your personal connection to this story? This story should be something that is deeply meaningful to you.
Welcome to The Whole Writer, a place where we talk about what it means to show up as someone who's grounded in their voice, in their community, and in their creative path, even when the world tells them to hustle, compare, or conform. I'm Nicole Meyer, a multi-published author and book coach who believes that nurturing the person behind the page is just as important as refining the words on it. In each episode, we'll explore the terrain of writing life with honesty, warmth, and practical wisdom, creating space for you to write from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. Whether you're drafting your first manuscript or publishing your fifth book, you'll find conversation and companionship for the journey here. So settle in, bring your questions and your curiosity, and let's discover together what it means to write and live with authenticity and purpose. Welcome, listeners. I'm so happy that you're joining me here on The Whole Writer because today I have a special guest, and that's Karin Gillespie. I have been following Karin because of her wonderful books. I've been reading her novels, but also I'm newly introduced to her because she has an amazing Substack community. If anyone is not part of Substack, I really encourage you to go over there and check it out, and we'll talk all about that. But first, before I jump into all things writing and publishing with Karin, especially pitching, I want to read her very quick bio. So Karin Gillespie is the author of 9 novels with Simon & Schuster, Henry Press, and also self-published. She has an MFA in creative writing from Converse College, and she has an incredible Substack called Pitch Your Novel. Welcome, Karin.
Hi, Nicole. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so happy you're here too. And remind us where you're calling in from.
Savannah, Georgia. Beautiful Savannah, Georgia. And it's gorgeous today. I mean, 80 degrees.
Oh,
sunny. Lovely.
And we're recording this in November, so that sounds special.
I've got on flip-flops right now. So.
Oh, I just love it. Well, I want to talk to you all about what you offer to writers, and that's what drew me to you, honestly, Karin. I mean, I actually adored your novel called The Pitch Queen.
Oh, thank you.
It was so much fun. I really loved it. But I also am, like I said in the intro, so drawn to you because you are offering a window or maybe a big door. Maybe you're swinging the door open for writers into the world of publishing, especially into pitching their novels. And that's what drew me to you, is that you are really extending a hand to others who are just coming into this world and helping them figure it out. And we're going to get into all of that today, but I thought we would ease into it. And first talk about, if you could share a little bit about your journey as an author, what led you to focus on helping writers navigate the publishing world.
Great. Well, my journey informed how the Substack came about. So I started out with the Big 5, and I did 5 books with them. And I was actually able to support myself as a writer for a number of years, and it was pretty peachy. And I thought it would go on and on like that. But then my editor got fired, and my option was not renewed. And so it was time for plan B. So I went and got an MFA. And after I was done with that, MFA in creative writing, once I was done with that, I pitched my thesis book to an agent, and they took it out on Sub, and it did not sell.
Okay.
So I went with a smaller publisher, and I found myself so happy with that publisher because they were so transparent. And I could pick up the phone at any time and call them, and the royalties were higher. It was a great experience. And I did 2 books with them, and they took my whole backlist as well.
Oh, they
And it was
took
a
your
very-
backlist.
Yes, yeah. So I was happy there. But unfortunately, the problem with smaller publishers is sometimes they go out of business. And that was the case with this one. So that wasn't happy. But I got all of my backlist and I decided to put it up myself to indie publish. And I was so shoddy about the whole thing. I made my own covers. I did not do it in a professional way at all. And I didn't expect much, but I was wrong. All of a sudden, I was making as much as I had traditionally published, which just blew me away. So I did that for a few years. And when you indie publish, you have to sort of feed the machine. And when I had written another novel, I said, well, I want to go back to trad because it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's a full-time job is what I tell people.
Yes, it is. It is. And by the way, I'd had all these Amazon reviews and blurbs and things with the previously published books. So I didn't have to worry about that. But with a new book, I would have to get blurbs and all of that kind of stuff. So I was on sub for a year and we heard back from 2 editors during that time. And I said, this is crazy. And that's when I started investigating publishing. I was in all these subgroups and my story was not singular. The submission groups these days are going, oh my gosh, we're being ghosted by editors. We're not hearing back. It's been 6 months. Agents are now saying, I'm not going to nudge until 6 months. It's a completely different sub experience than when I first started out as a novelist. And so I wanted to investigate why that was happening. And I realized that this climate is so much more competitive than it used to be. That's what I found with my investigation. Writers go in blindly, they're never going to make it. They really have to be pros with this. And that's why I wanted to do Pitch Your Novel. I said, they don't know. They don't have a clue. Now, there's some very savvy writers, but most people, I also evaluate query letters. I don't do it now, but I used to. And you read most of them and you go, oh my gosh, they don't have a clue. This is not going to pass muster. So I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach this new climate and how competitive. I wanted to be as realistic with writers as I could be. It's kind of grim sometimes, but I think information is power.
Well, I love that. And we'll get into all of the things that you are sharing because you are kind of a truth teller in terms of you want to help people, but you want to tell them the truth. But let's go back for any listener who is unfamiliar with the path of getting a literary agent and then what happens when the agent goes on submission, takes your work on submission to acquisition editors. There's some people listening who aren't familiar. So can you kind of walk us through that process?
Right. So an agent will prepare a list of editors that they usually have a relationship with. And they all do it a little bit different, but they're going to have a pitch letter. Very often they use elements from your query and they send it out and say to the editor, I have this project and are you interested? And editors, for the most part, will usually say, yeah, sure, send it to me. Or sometimes an agent will send the full and just say, here it is if you want it. And then you kind of wait to see if anybody is interested. And typically, when I first went on sub, I heard back from every editor in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's
and then I was on sub another time. Yeah, I know. And then I was on sub for that thesis novel. And again, we heard back. To not hear back for a year is incredible.
Yeah.
To only hear a few responses. So that's kind of what's going on these days. And then if the agent doesn't hear from the editor, they nudge them. And sometimes the editor won't ever get back. And that's what we call ghosting. You just won't ever hear from that editor at all. And I think after the pandemic, 20% of editorial staff was lost. And they didn't really replace those people. So they are just so overworked. And so I think that's a lot of the problem. It's a completely different atmosphere than when I was on sub.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. And I can attest that's true. I think it was during the pandemic that my agent took out a different manuscript for me. And I had one editor that expressed so much interest in the partial and me, and they just took 9 months. And so I just waited and waited and waited. And at the end of the 9 months, they had to pass because there was no longer a market for that certain book. But I can attest that that's true for sure.
Oh, I am so sorry. So you know how that feels. And
Yes.
the panic on these submission boards, I'm talking about like at Facebook, there's private submission boards or there's some discords where people talk amongst themselves. And these people are just besides themselves because they thought, oh, I've got an agent now. Of course I'm going to get an editor. And it really isn't happening the way we'd like. And of course, there are exceptions. There are times when you have like a really hot genre.
Yes.
And all kinds of editors will be scrambling for that project. But that is definitely the exception to the rule these days.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would say to the listener who's just learning about all this is some agents, good agents, will keep you informed of, here's my pitch list. Here's who I'm going out to on submission. Here's how the feedback's coming in. But I have worked with some writers who say their agents never tell them who they're going out to when they're going on submission. And they just wait and wait and wait. And then they'll hear like sort of a group response. So it depends on the agent. I think the better agents are more transparent. But yeah, there's a big variety of how you get the news as well.
Oh, yeah. A lot of writers can be afraid of their agent to ask for that kind of information. But yeah, if you're a good agent, you're very transparent about the process. Why wouldn't you be? And of course, a lot of agents will say, hey, do you want to hear about the passes?
Right.
Or do you want to not? Or do you only want good news?
Right.
And all of that. And so, yeah, a lot of it depends on the agent. And are they good at nudging and that kind of stuff too?
Right. Okay, well, let's stay on that thread, even though I have a million other questions for you.
I love that thread.
So we're talking about this. We're kind of backtracking and talking to people who maybe aren't as familiar, but you're talking about why the landscape has changed so much and it's so competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And you often describe publishing as a culture with its own language.
Yes.
So I want to hear from you what you think are some of the biggest misconceptions writers have. What are the misunderstandings they have when they first try and break in?
Well, I'm going to start with the query because that document is so important. And most writers really do not have a clue about how they're supposed to approach that. So you have to know about comps, which are comparable titles to your book. And they have to be appropriate comps. Like most people will say, hey, it has to be within 5 years. It has to be titles that have sold decent, but not too much. They can't be outliers. It's like a Goldilocks situation to find these books. And you really have to do a lot of research. If you're pitching particular genres to an agent, you have to know the tropes of that genre, particularly in romance. Romance is being pitched in a completely different way than it used to be. Like, for instance, if you're writing dark romance, you have to know about shadow daddies or touch her and I'll kill you. All of these tropes that you might not be aware of to show that you read like crazy in that genre.
Yeah.
And that you know the tropes that readers expect.
I'm so happy you brought up dark romance because for the listeners, that is selling like hotcakes right now.
It is.
The darker, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, subgenres. You don't just pitch horror these days, which is also another very hot genre.
Yes.
You have to say, well, it's a haunted house horror story or know those specific subgenres. Women's fiction. Nobody pitches it as women's fiction anymore because that's sort of out. So you talk about it as upmarket instead of women's fiction. So all of these little distinctions that writers probably do not know at all, it's very difficult to come out sounding savvy because you're just not involved in that culture and know all the tricks and so on. Appropriate word counts, of course, for genres would be something else. Oh, and then you have to know how to write a one-sentence pitch. And I can't tell you how many query letters I read that don't include that.
Right.
That is going to put you at a big disadvantage.
Would you recommend that one sentence pitch or hook go right at the top or somewhere towards the body of the query letter?
I like it right at the top.
I do too.
So one place you can get a good idea of how pitches read is Publishers Marketplace. There is a subscription fee. It does cost $30, but you can turn it off at any time. And this will help you speak the language of publishing because you can see how books are pitched. So what I would do is basically the title, the genre, and then going into the one sentence pitch that says follows the journey of so-and-so who does so and such. And then you go into the larger description because we have to understand how agents read query letters. They skim them. And if they have to figure out what your one sentence pitch is from your 3 paragraphs of description, you're slowing them down. Why make that work for them? And maybe they are in a bad mood that day and they'll say, I need a one sentence pitch. And Query Tracker often asks for that. It will say, what is your one sentence pitch? So that is very important.
It is so important. I think one of the sometimes illuminating, maybe even heartbreaking things when writers learn about the query letter and the process of trying to get an agent, and also when you're on submission getting a publisher, is they're reading this information differently than how you wrote it. You wrote it to tell what your story's about. They're reading to see if it's marketable. They're reading to see, did these comps sell? Are they relevant to today's market? They're reading it to see, are there any stakes? Is this something that will grab a reader? And can I pitch this to a certain publisher who's been asking for this kind of book? So I hate to, burst people's bubble, but this really is a business. And yes, we want to know what your story's about, but you're making a business pitch at the end of the day.
Yes, you are. And your one sentence pitch is like the DNA of your story.
Love that.
Yeah. And most agents will look at it to see if all of the story elements are there. And one of the problems, of course, is with one sentence pitches is authors very often lead with generalities or themes. And that is a problem that won't work as your pitch.
Well, that's really helpful. I bet you people are taking notes right now. This is a great segue for me to talk about your Substack because you have dedicated your time and energy and your wisdom to helping people learn how to pitch their novel. And that is why your Substack publication is called Pitch Your Novel.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about that? I just love the summary for that too, if you want me to read it.
Yeah, sure.
So for Pitch Your Novel, you say publishing is a culture, and if you don't speak the language, you'll fumble around. And you say, consider me your Sherpa, which I just love that. I've been involved in publishing for over 20 years as an author, but every week I research the most up-to-date information to help you succeed. I mean, Karin, that's what we all need.
Well, and you do, because if you get query advice, say from someone that's been a published author for 10 years, it's a completely different process than it used to be. Like comps, I had no idea what comps were when I first started querying. But some agents actually say that's the most important part of the query letter. And it takes research to find those comps. And you usually have to qualify them in some way. Like you'll say, oh, it's got the pathos of wedding people, but with the humor of lessons in chemistry, something like that. To make your idea as clear as possible and to explain where your book will fit, what genre it is, and absolutely know how to sell it.
Speaking of genre, do you see a lot of writers pick the wrong genre for their book?
Yes, I do. A lot of writers will say they're literary writers, which that is a completely different culture. If you say you're a literary writer, you better have the credentials to back it up. You can't call yourself a literary writer without an MFA or prize winning or something pretty prestigious that way. That's how you are a literary novel. Publications and things like Glimmer Train or other journals and stuff, that is a whole different ball of wax.
It really is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't call yourself a literary agent, probably unless you have a PhD. I'm sorry. Don't call
literary
yourself a
writer.
literary writer unless you have a lot of credentials to back it up. Yeah.
I agree. I see people making mistakes, and that's okay. You know, we all have to.
Yeah. Oh, sure. It is. It's
But I
fine.
do see a lot of people, and it's nuanced, right? So some people say, I have a thriller, and I'll say, well, it's not a thriller, it's domestic fiction because you don't have a crime in here. And
Oh, yeah.
it's so nuanced. So I would say exactly what you said. Study, people have to learn what are the books that could be comparables, how are they marketing themselves, and what genres are they falling under. You know, online, you can do a lot of this research, which saves people a lot of heartache when they realize that they're pitching the wrong agent who doesn't even take that type of genre.
Exactly. Amazon has so much information. You can look at how the book is described. You can look at what the also bots are, so you can see where it sort of fits in the publishing world. It's just so much information out there, but you do have to do the research. And yes, that thriller, that makes a lot of sense. Or people pitching romances without a happy ending. That would have to be a love story.
Right. Well, speaking of research and good information, you come out every week on your Substack and you really do the work for us. You are a resource. Just like I say, Jane Friedman is a resource for publishing. I feel like you're a good resource for pitching. So can you talk about what people can expect or find from you when they do follow your Substack?
Well, once a month, I look at what was sold. And so I'll tell you what genres are hot and what aren't. And I look at each week pitches and I evaluate them, the good and the bad, and try to show you some of the mistakes that a lot of people make. So I always do that. I look at how books that are published are pitched and I comment on that. So it's all about basically presenting yourself in the best way, is what I'm thinking. How can I sell my book to publishers or to agents and anything? So I'll talk about titles, for instance, or taglines, how to write that description. I have a lot of archives that explain all of those things that you need to look at when you're trying to sell your book.
Which is so helpful. And I love how many real life examples you give. Where do you get the example query letters, example pitches from Publishers Marketplace and so forth?
Yes, I do get some of them. And then I have readers, they'll submit their pitches. I have a thing called Ask the Pitch Doctor. And I can't tell you how much people need work on that. They really do. A pitch needs to tell a story. It really does. And most people are just fumble around with that. So at some point we can talk about what those elements are and all that you need to have in the pitch if you want. But
go down the short list for us. Let's do a quick short list of what elements you recommend in a good pitch.
You need, first of all, a character that wants something, a desire line. And you need an inciting incident that kind of kicks off the story, like the tornado in Wizard of Oz. And then you need obstacles. Okay, you have a character with a desire, and then you have obstacles to that desire. And what happens if the character doesn't get that desire? That's the stakes. So you want some kind of stakes. And you can hint at character arc as well.
But you don't want to give away the ending, correct?
Yeah, you don't have to give away the ending.
Right.
Yeah. No. It's kind of ambiguous. Yeah. But it should read like a story with all of those elements. And agents are looking for that. They're like, well, what happens if she doesn't get her desire? It doesn't sound like there's any stakes there. Or I see situations instead of stories, like a policeman falls in love with a lottery winner. And that's it. What are the things that keep them apart? And what happens if they don't get together and that sort of thing?
That's very helpful. And I know that there are people listening saying, okay, I'm writing all this down. I'm making sure that my query letter or my pitch includes these things. But they're probably also saying, well, how do I make sure that I learn everything that I need to know? And my answer would be to follow your Substack, but I'm not sure if you have a different answer. Any other resources?
Oh, well, yours. Your podcast is very valuable and it takes practice. It is hard. It is very hard to distill a novel into all of these elements. And the sad thing is, the reason it can be hard is because maybe some of those elements are missing from the novel. So what I recommend for writers is make sure you have a pitch before you even write the novel. So it can be like a mission statement for your novel. And so you can be looking, is her desire, is it in almost every part of the novel? Because that's what the desire is, the spine of the novel. It gives a novel narrative drive. Like, this is an old example, but Scarlett O'Hara in
Gone with the
Gone with
Wind.
the Wind. Sorry to go all the way back, but all this stuff is happening to her. There's a civil war, all this stuff, but she has one desire. Ashley, Ashley, Ashley.
Yes.
It's the sign of it. And you see it almost in every scene. Everything that she does is to get that desire.
Great example.
To her detriment, right?
Yeah.
And then the arc has to do with Scarlett might not get what she wants, but she will get maybe what she needs. What she really needed was Rhett. He was a better match for her. So a well-written pitch, a well-structured pitch can really help guide that novel and make sure you don't get off track, which if you're anything like me, you can go off on tangents, lose that spine. So.
Absolutely. I think that that's such great advice. I know that a lot of other authors do that too. I'm thinking of my friend Camille Pagan. She also recommends coming up with your query or your log line first. And so I think that it's a great container, but would you say people are allowed to evolve that container or change? Let's say they start writing the book and they're making discoveries. Is it okay to go back and change that?
Of course. Self-publishing was very helpful to me because I realized I really had to think about how to sell a book. I had to think like a publisher, and I had to create my own Facebook ads and all that. And some of my books weren't easy to do that with. So when you think these things through, you look at your book like it is something that you have to sell. What's the hook? How can I get people interested in this? How can I give them context so they know, hey, this book is for me? If a book is too confusing, people just pass it by. They don't know what they're getting. So it's been great for me. Before I write novels, I write a pitch. I write the query letter. I even do pitch decks, like visual pictures with Canva to make Facebook ads, just because why would I want to create a novel that I can't figure out how I can communicate it to readers? So I do all those things. And sure, I switch things all of the time as I go, but it keeps me focused. I can look at that query letter and go, okay, this doesn't work anymore. What's really heartbreaking is to write a novel and have to write the query and have to write the pitch, and you're just twisting yourself into knots because maybe that novel doesn't have the elements that it needs to have.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm a visual learner, so I love that you said you even create pitch decks. I mean, that sounds like great creative inspiration. I think if you get writer's block, that's a great thing to go to as well.
Yeah. It switches to a different kind of design brain or whatever. And I get ideas when I do that, how I want to convey it. Yeah, but no, the process, I'm the kind of person that loves discovering as I go along with writing. But now that I know so much about what publishers buy, I don't want to write something that they aren't going to buy, or there's no chance.
None of us do. Okay, so let's give the listeners something really hopeful. And I think that would come in the form of some nice advice from you. So if someone is starting their debut novel and they're thinking about what do they need to know before they start this publishing journey, what would you like to share with them?
Understand that it is a journey, but it's going to be fun. After having written novels for 20 years, what I have discovered is that the actual writing of the novel and then the incubation period where you get up from your desk and all of a sudden inspiration comes, that is just an amazing process to me. It's like magic. And so that's what I write for. Every novelist does this for a long time. It's going to write things that won't sell. There's going to be things that don't work. Your heart is going to be broken. But when you sit at that computer and you start that magical process and you realize that, wow, all of this stuff is coming to me, all these answers. I never worry about what's going to come next because I know that somehow I'll get the idea and it will go on. And to me, there is nothing more satisfying than the actual writing and coming up with this story that is meaningful to me. And I think that is probably the most important thing that I could say to writers. What is your personal connection to this story? This story should be something that is deeply meaningful to you. You read my novel, The Pitch Queen.
Yes.
I wanted to see the other side of publishing in a gentler way. I wanted to put my head in a literary agent's head and have her see what I think is wrong with publishing.
Yeah.
And have her realize that that was very meaningful to me to figure that out. Thematic things really matter to me. So, yeah.
I love that. And just as a reader, as a side note, I did love seeing through the lens of a literary agent. And that was your protagonist in the book, which was
Right.
so much fun and so satisfying.
Right.
But I thank you for ending this on just that lovely, hopeful note of, yes, it's a business. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you do need to get certain formulas correct in order to have a chance. But at the end of the day, it's about the joy. It's about writing something that actually is very meaningful to the writer. And it's about being fulfilled. So that's very hopeful and lovely.
Yeah. I would do it if I never got published again. And that doesn't always happen at the beginning of the journey. But if you keep at it, I mean, I can't tell you anything more satisfying than what I do every day. I wake up and I'm so lucky to do this.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Okay. I bet you people are dying to follow you on Substack. Can you tell listeners where they can find you?
Okay. It's called Pitch Your Novel. That should be easy to find. It's the only one with that name. Yeah.
Great.
So Pitch Your Novel, Substack.
Thank you so much, Karin. This was so much fun to talk about. And we can't wait to follow along and see what you come up with.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our talk.
Yes. Okay, listeners, thanks for joining us. And I'll see you next time on The Whole Writer. If you want to check out my coaching programs for fiction writers, visit NicoleMeyer.com. That's MEIER. And if you like this episode, I'd love you to take a minute to leave a rating and review for this podcast. This will help more writers like you to discover the show and to get going on their writing journey. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, happy writing, everyone.